In 1942, New Guinea was divided into two territories. Papua New Guinea was under Australian control. Dutch New Guinea was under Holland's control. The island is over 1,400 miles long, with mountains reaching to 16,000 feet. Port Moresby was the only real village in New Guinea. It was also the only Allied base in the country in 1942. The Japanese control the entire island except Moresby from their large base at Rabaul, New Britain. Enemy air attacks on our airstrip at 7 Mile Moresby and at harbor facilities became a daily occurrence. Night raids were also common. It took the Allies 2.5 years to eliminate the Japanese from the island. General MacArthur's leapfrog tactics neutralized many of the enemy. Our chaplain conducting Easter services at Mariba, Northern Australia, 1943. We are 600 miles south of Port Moresby, New Guinea. Our 3 fighter squadrons, 35th, 36th, and the 80th of the 8th Fighter Group, Army Air Corps, have just returned from New Guinea. These are Air Corps personnel preparing to embark on another trip to New Guinea, our third to enemy action. Carbines and barracks bags were standard with our enlisted men. A good share of these men were airplane maintenance section people. They were my responsibility as engineering officer. These are pilots and ground officers getting their first promotion. Note the variety of uniforms. Mostly Australian clothing, including shirts, shorts, and fleece-lined flying boots. Our CO, Major McNay, congratulates his officers. Lunchtime for our pilots, including Aussie beer. The Jeep, however, is the only one that's loaded. Our GIs leaving on a 2.5-ton truck. This is Milne Bay, the eastern tip of New Guinea. The coconut trees are part of Lever Brothers' plantation, an Allied transport hit by the Japs. The Aussie Army is first off. Next come our men. Milne Bay was wet, muddy, and malaria infested. Practically all our men had malaria at one time or another. I had it twice, along with a bout of dengue fever. Our campsite with toolboxes and cots prior to setting up tents. Camp and fighter strip are in a coconut plantation. Note the cots with mosquito nets. An Aussie torpedo bomber coming in. These are P-39 Airacobras landing on metal matting. We are about to use a wing originally bound for the RAF. After a rain, water and coconuts. P-39's on alert. Note droppable gas tanks below belly. Dropped only on Jap interceptions. P-38 fighters landing at 3 Mile Airstrip, Port Moresby. This was a twin-engine, supercharged airplane, and more than a match for the Jap Zero. At one time, each of our group's 3 squadrons had different aircraft, P-38, P-39, and P-40s. Maintenance became very difficult. We are changing a P-39 engine. Note engine is behind cockpit. The engine drive shaft extended below the pilot to prop gearbox. Because of this arrangement, we fired either a 37mm or a 20mm cannon through hub of propeller. Pilots with their 45s going to chow line. GIs in the chow line. All our water had to be boiled. Our bake shop. A C-47 landing on our strip. 3 young native boys. Our camp at Milne Bay. Palm thatched buildings were common. P-38s from the 80th Squadron. These are unrehearsed pictures of pilots after returning from mission against the Jap Zeros. They shot down several Zeros and naturally are excited. Each pilot wears a life vest, 45 pistol, and knife. Fighter pilots were lost frequently. Not only in combat, but weather and operation accidents took their toll. Flights were made of 4 planes each. We usually could get 16 P-38s available for each squadron's mission. Each squadron's complement was 25 airplanes, but rarely did we have that many. The Jap bombers hit us hard this January day in 1943. These pictures are at our bomber strip at Milne Bay. Our trucks, gas tankers, bombers, and fuel dumps were all casualties. We tried to disperse both bomber and fighter planes. You will note coconut logs used for airplane protection in the revetments. As I recall, we had very little warning this time, resulting in our fighters not making contact with the Jap Betty bombers before their bomb run. These bombers were coming from Rabaul, New Britain, the large Japanese air base north of us. This Jap tank apparently ran off the road. Jap prisoner with Aussie guard. A New Guinea sunset. General Wordsmith, 5th Air Force Fighter Command General, is decorating officers and men of the 36th Fighter Squadron at Milne Bay. The presentation is right on our airstrip in the coconut plantation. Clean, long-sleeve shirts and long pants are the uniform of the day. My men usually worked in shorts only. However, later we found that this was a bad malaria area, necessitating more body covering. We were taking quinine at first and later Atabrin for malaria. The yellow-nosed P-38s of the 80th Squadron are coming in from a mission. This was our leading squadron of the 8th Group, with 203 confirmed Jap planes to their credit at that time. Each squadron had different colored nose cones. This is the result of Allied bombing and strafing at the Jap air base at Lae, New Guinea. These are Jap Zero fighters and Betty bombers. General Kenny, Allied Air Commander, Southwest Pacific Area, is decorating our pilots and personnel at 3 Mile Airstrip, Port Moresby. Camouflage and sandbags protect building and background. Engine change on a P-38. Maintenance on this airplane was much greater, mainly because of 2 engines. We were fortunate to keep 16 out of 25 in flyable condition. All our aircraft carried droppable gas belly tanks. The 38s, 2, 1 for each engine. Upon interception with the enemy, the tanks were dropped and the airplane went into combat with full wing tanks. Upon completing a flight, each pilot makes out a maintenance report which the crew chief receives and turns over to the engineering officer. Each crew chief is responsible for his airplane only. This is a young native boy at our Milne Bay camp who has been asked to knock some coconuts down for us. Apparently he knows how to climb the tree. Someone told him that he would have a cigarette if he did the job. Even the natives cried sometimes. Notice the GI shirt and officer's insignia on the boy. B-25 Mitchell bombers are about to take off from our airstrip at Nadzab, north coast of New Guinea. They are to bomb and strafe the Jap air base at Hollandia, 800 miles west. For strafing, the B-25 was modified by adding 2 50 caliber guns on each side of the fuselage, along with the 450s in the nose, gave the B-25 a total of 8 50s firing forward. In our almost 2.5 years in the Pacific, our camp at Cape Gloucester, New Britain, was the muddiest and wettest. The rain averaged about 2 inches a day for 3 weeks. I don't think we flew over a couple missions during this time. We had plenty of fresh water off the tents. Mosquito nets on every cot were a must everywhere we went. Most of the time was spent in the tents except for chow or latrine business. We are in a B-17 4-engine bomber flying over the New Guinea mountains. Jungle was everywhere and no roads. One of our pilots bailed out 3 miles from our airstrip one day and barely made it back between the mosquitoes and the crocodiles. He was bitten by one. We are at our rest camp in northern Australia. The officers are playing the enlisted men. The umpire with cigar behind the plate is a B-17 pilot. P-39 pilot that has had a few beers. Australian beer was good, but sometimes green. The men put it in anything. They hadn't had a beer for 6 months. I am flying in a PBY Catalina airplane. This aircraft was used for observation and rescue work. We land on a river to pick up a downed pilot, an Aussie officer. They are rowed to plane by natives in their log canoe. The hatless pilot is real happy to see us. Another sunset. P-39s landing in Australia. These planes were built by Bell. They were heavy, well-built, but underpowered at high altitudes due to lack of a supercharger. As a preface on the next scenes, money didn't mean anything in New Guinea. Everything was barter. The film that I used to take these pictures came from Air Corps Supply. The price was usually 4 rolls for a bottle of gin or whiskey. We are landing at 6,000 feet in central New Guinea. Many very primitive natives are here. An Aussie captain runs a native hospital. The airstrip and the landscaping were all done by the natives. 1 shell for a week's work. 1 shell buys a wife, 2 shells buy a pig. The rare exotic birds of paradise are used for headdresses in native ceremonies. We went out one day and shot the birds with bow and arrows. The natives then stuffed them with grass. The Aussie captain taught the men the game of soccer. The men wear tree bark around the waist trimmed with grass for the bustle. There are many varieties of birds of paradise. The red and yellow varieties are the most common. The men could have as many wives as they could support. However, I did attend a native court where the wife appealed to the judge of the tribe and was released from her husband. The pig was the main source of meat. We visited a remote native village where the natives had only seen one white man before. They had never felt cloth and became terrified at our jeep horn and lights. The Aussie captain is showing the chief pictures of himself. First time he had ever seen himself. The natives gathered one day with all their war paint, spears, bow and arrows. Apparently somebody saw Japs nearby. The native interpreter is advising the chief where to go to head off the Japs. We were fortunate to get these pictures, as this was a real war party who actually did kill some Jap soldiers. Bird feathers for the headdress and bulses are common. A beautiful sunset ends our experience.
This is part 2 of First Fighters in New Guinea. Some of the scenes are similar to first real scenes. We begin with Easter at Mariba, Australia, 1943, having returned from New Guinea for rest. Colonel Wise, our 8th Group CO, was just shown. Baseball at Mariba, 1943. The enlisted men are playing the officers. The odds would naturally be with the men. There are more of them. The men are at bat at that point, now the officers. Rifle range for enlisted men near Townsville, Australia, 1942. Each enlisted man was issued a rifle. The only practice they had was when we returned to Australia from the combat zone in New Guinea. Officers all carried 45 automatic pistols. The pilots carried them in shoulder holsters, and it was hard to be accurate with a 45. A miss at the target is signified by the back and forth paddle. We called it Maggie's drawers. These are 2.5-ton trucks that the men are getting into now. The first officer at the pistol range is Lieutenant Mainwaring. We called him Bourbon Danny. Lieutenant Mark Bothan, our ordnance officer in the 36th Squadron, instructs in the use of the .45 pistol. The shirtless officers are Lieutenant Fred Taylor with cap on the left and Lieutenant Welch on the right. Welch came to the 36th Squadron after shooting down 4 Jap Zeros at Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941. He later became a major with 16 Jap planes to his credit. Subsequently, he was killed in the States. These are 36th Squadron pilots and ground officers at Townsville. Lieutenant George Ricker puts in an appearance as we end the camp scene. This is Captain Ming coming out of his tent wearing Australian flying boots. We catch Ricker again sitting on his trunk. We continue with camp scenes with enlisted men and officers. Sergeant Cascarella reads the orders prior to our embarkation by boat to New Guinea. Boat trip to Milne Bay, New Guinea, fall of 1942. This is a Dutch ship, and we are going to New Guinea for the second time with Australian troops. The Dutch flag. A gun drill is now put on by the Australians. And New Guinea sunset. These are Aussies and Americans leaving our ship at Milne Bay, the far eastern tip of New Guinea. The Aussies carry everything with them. This is an engine change on one of our P-38s. P-38's coming in from a mission. Each squadron had different colored nose cones. It was a very fine twin-engine fighter. The first planes in our 36th Squadron were the P-39s, and they are now on alert at our strip at Milne Bay. This is a native boy with our Sergeant Coscarella. He used to climb coconut trees for us for cigarettes. A P-40 in the background. These are natives at Mount Hog in New Guinea. A beautiful area, 6,000 feet up in the mountains. Talking to the chief. These are very wild, primitive natives at this point. These are natives on an island near Port Moresby, where we sometimes visited in native canoes. All these natives are very friendly and cooperated much with our service people. Port Moresby was the first American base in New Guinea. We were there as the first 2 American squadrons in May of 1942. The officer you see there was Lieutenant Hager of the 36th Squadron. All the people on this island lived above the ground in their thatched accommodations. Beautiful falls near Port Moresby. I believe it was called Rona Falls. General Wordsmith on the left, the 5th Fighter Command General, is decorating our officers and men at Milne Bay, New Guinea. Note the pilot here who forgets to salute. Our 36th Squadron doctor now is being decorated. Our 8th Group CO, Colonel Wise, ends our scene.